But Erin, you say that Trump is the one with the movement behind him. That's in your piece from earlier. You say that many panelists, many pundits are saying some of the things that Jamelle is saying, and you're sort of worried that they may be glossing over some points. How do you respond to that?
Look, I think what we have seen from the polls over the last 10 months is that Donald Trump has an ability to move the polls. We all heard about the ceiling that he had last September, that it was 25%. And then throughout the primary season, that number kept moving up to the point that in the last several primaries, Donald Trump was reaching about 60% in those primaries. He had a majority of the vote, not just a plurality. We have seen Donald Trump find a way to move poll numbers. He moved his favorability ratings. He was underwater with a higher unfavorability rating than a favorability rating with the Republican electorate over the summer last year, and then he flipped that, and he flipped it twice. He's getting people behind him, and people who once didn't like him at the beginning of the primary season changed their minds. I think we're going to see a lot of different things happen in the next 6 months. Also, Hillary Clinton is going to be in some trouble. The email scandal will come up again. I think it's too early to call this race over. Democrats, when they get cocky, often lose. And to call this race over now is a really foolish thing to do.
But again, go ahead, Jamelle.
Again, this is, Donald Trump accomplished these things in the Republican primary electorate. Let's look at Mitt Romney's 2012 performance. Mitt Romney won 60% of white voters, 61% of white voters, and white voters were around 67% of the electorate. And he could not get past 47% of the vote. He lost minority voters around 79% to 21%. Donald Trump's favorability among Latinos nationally, according to the most recent survey from Latino Decisions, is 87% unfavorable. Among African Americans, 85% unfavorable. Among women, 70% unfavorables. Donald Trump has to outperform Mitt Romney either with minorities, which seems deeply unlikely, or he has to generate white turnout of a kind we've literally never seen before. And that just strikes me as unlikely. I mean, maybe Donald Trump is like this wizard of persuasion, but I really doubt it.
Erin.
I think that we have a 6-month campaign that needs to be executed. And I think that we're seeing that Donald Trump is whip smart. He's been able to manipulate the media. He has been able to manipulate the Republican Party to his advantage. And I think counting that out this early is a problem. I understand what the demographics are. We all know from analysis that that is true. But if you look at the last 2 midterm elections, and I understand this is a presidential year, but the last 2 midterm elections show that the demographics didn't matter so much. Even in Maryland, a Democrat who was expected to win the governor election in Maryland in 2014, he lost. And we have a Republican governor in Maryland. I just think that it's lazy to think only about the demographics and to forget the movement that Donald Trump has created for a lot of Americans. And I do think that it's true that more white Americans will come out. He has certainly lit a fire under the Rust Belt for sure. And I do think we could see some states flip. It's possible. It is foolish to count that out this early.
Go ahead, Jamelle.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, but it's not the case that Donald Trump has yielded more turnout among working class Americans. There's no evidence of it. His support is concentrated among middle-income white Americans in the Republican primary. And, it's not just demographics. It's the fact that Donald Trump did not face any significant challenge from roughly August to about February. There are whole lines of attack against Trump, centered on his racist statements, his racist policies, his misogynistic statements that Republicans didn't touch for fear of alienating Trump voters. Democrats do not have this problem. Democrats will be running a billion-dollar campaign in the fall focused on all of these things. Donald Trump has actually never withstood those kinds of attacks on his views. And so
I disagree with that. I disagree that he has not withstood those kinds of attacks.
It could be that, Jamelle, that a lot of the attacks, the things that you point out in your piece and that you're saying right now, came too late for the Republicans. And
that's exactly right. That's exactly right. They came at the point where Donald Trump was a fully normalized candidate and had a large enough plurality to succeed in a Republican primary. That's just not the case in the general election. And it's worth saying that roughly, I think, 6% of voters have even cast a ballot for Donald Trump. He has fewer voters casting a ballot for him than Hillary Clinton, for example. And so if millions of Americans are primed to support Donald Trump, then just as many, if not more, are primed to support Hillary Clinton. And the data on the field suggests that in a matchup, he has the deep disadvantage.
Yeah, Erin, that's sort of interesting because at the end of the day, the perception has been that Mr. Trump is gaining a lot of working class votes. But when you look at some of the data, in fact, it appears that Hillary Clinton has a lot of working class Americans that are supporting her, and Donald Trump's numbers seem to be more middle income, a little better educated, a little more money.
Oh, okay, I think that's absolutely right. Let me step back for a second to talk about Donald Trump's style and his temperament and the attacks on that. I do think the attacks came through. They didn't necessarily come from his rivals until later in the campaign, but I think the American electorate is very familiar with Donald Trump's style, and I think continuing to attack on that might be a mistake for the Clinton campaign, and they should actually try to treat this as at a much higher level and attack him on some policies and try to create more of a choice, because I think you'll see some protest votes if that's all they do and say that he is unfit for office. I don't think that's the smartest way to conduct a campaign. Now, in terms of the data, you're absolutely right. I'm not suggesting that the data say right now that Donald Trump can win. What I'm suggesting is that it's foolish to think that this data might not change, that the polls could change, that he could start to create more likability around himself so that voters could flock to him over the next 6 months.
All right. We clearly, the producers in my ear are telling me to wrap this, but it's such an interesting discussion. Jamelle Bouie and Erin McPike, thank you both so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.